So when you're making art and you're doing the one thing, do you find yourself like in a like what would be called a flow state?
Well, I do. I mean, I find the flow state really interesting. I mean, I think that's sort of like one of the things that I think about as being this sort of an opportunity to sort of demystify an art making
Yeah.
practice because I, so like I've drawn or painted the figure pretty consistently
Hmm.
since I was really young because I took a figure drawing class when I was 12 that was like an adult, like nude figure drawing class. And I've sort of been, and I went to an arts high school in Los Angeles where they also had live nude models that we could draw from. And so I've really been consistently drawing the figure for, let's see, 34. So I've been consistently drawing it for like 22 years,
Yeah.
which is long enough to really get those like 10,000 hours in that they talk
Yeah.
about, like when you can start to be an expert at something. And I
Hmm.
do think that like art really has this component of being like what I love about it actually is that it's a technical skill that
Hmm.
sort of transcends its technical aspects. And
Hmm.
so, and I think the way that it has that transcendence is because it's rooted in the technical. And then when you put in those sort of 10,000 or so hours, you can actually, you're no longer thinking about the mechanics of what you're doing.
Right.
And it really allows for that flow state to enter where you can sort of let all these crazy ideas kind of coalesce into what you're doing. So for me, I can paint the figure kind of without thinking about painting the figure. And
Yeah.
that allows for like every crazy thing that I've like read and seen and heard about in conversations I'm having, and it can all kind of filter through the work. And I think that a lot of times that sort of can be seen as this sort of like oh, this like unique genius quality that you're either born with or you're not. But I think you're sort of born with the desire to put in those initial 10,000 hours,
Right.
and you're born with the ability to put in those 10,000 hours. So I was born to a circumstance where, you know, my mom was a single parent working full time, and like dropping me off at Barnesdale Junior Art Park was kind of like the cheapest childcare that existed. So it was like
Hmm.
I would go there, or I'd like, you know, be after school with like nothing to do. And so I'd doodle all day.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like, but I was in a creative family that gave me that opportunity. So it's sort of this combination of like, you have that drive to kind of self motivate yourself, but then you also are given the opportunity to have access to
Hmm.
like an arts education or at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But then it's sort of through that that you're able to access that flow state. And that's sort of like, that's actually when interesting innovative connections can come through, is through practicing a technical skill. So I do find that to be a really um, wonderful state, and also sort of like, I don't know, it's like, I mean, it is like a privileged position to be able to have that, but it's also something that's not because you're like just born innately
Right.
talented.
Yeah. Because you put in
You're
the
like,
time.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also something that I try to sometimes interrupt and resist in my work. So like,
Hmm.
um, I try to, I've been practicing having the flow state occur through observing the work rather than always making the work. So,
Mm.
because I think it's a fine line between flow state that's where you're actually accessing kind of like an interesting, innovative way of connecting ideas, and then having just habitual
Right.
movements happen.
Right.
So, so I will. That comes into when I will resist connecting parts of the figure, and I'll take a step back and look at it. So I'm not just always. It's not always an application of the
Yeah.
flow
Yeah. Yeah.
state.
That's super interesting.